Despite the fact that at the State Department the previous day, he had been told the situation with Japan was not immediately dangerous. At Pearl Harbor, Admiral Kimmel might have been less anxious if he had also been told about the Japanese carriers. It was a question he kept putting to Edwin Layton, his staff intelligence officer. Layton had studied all Rochefort's summaries, but he could give Kimmel no accurate information when he was repeatedly questioned.
What? You don't know where the carriers are?
No, sir.
You haven't any idea where they are?
No, sir. That's why I have Homeland Waters with a question mark. I don't know.
You mean to say that you, the intelligence officer, don't know where the carriers are?
No, sir. I don't.
You mean they could be coming around Diamond Head and you wouldn't know it?
Yes, sir. But I hope they'd have been sighted before now.
What did come around Diamond Head the next morning was the SS Lurline. Even as it maneuvered into its regular berth, Grogan was eager to get ashore. He was going to give his information about the Japanese signals to naval intelligence in the Alexander Young Building in Honolulu. Less than 6 miles away along the coast, Kimmel was never even told of Grogan's existence. The Lurline report was passed straight on to Washington, where that same day they translated a message sent from Honolulu 3 weeks before. The silence surrounding Pearl Harbor continued. The absence of any precise warning to the commanders meant that no state of alert could be maintained for very long. For the island, it was not going to be one of the busiest weekends of the year. Only the battleships were going to be in harbor, but out at sea, the Japanese were now only 3 days away. But the absence of Kimmel's aircraft carriers from Pearl Harbor had already been noted. On Thursday evening, on a beach across the island from Pearl Harbor, one of the staff from the Japanese consulate prepared to show lights out to sea from a deserted beach house. The timing of the lights would tell watching Japanese submarines which ships were in harbor. If that failed, a bonfire would be lit. From Washington, an order had gone out to every radio intercept facility to be on the alert for the key phrases of the wind's messages. Eric Nave was as keen as the Americans to know about Japanese moves in the Pacific.
When we knew that we would have this war warning in the form of this weather report from Tokyo, I had this young man, Ian Lloyd. He learned a bit of Japanese, and we put him with a special wireless intercept unit at a place called Park Orchards outside Melbourne. And he was to listen for this message, and he was the man that rang me and said, "I've got it." The message was, as instructed by Tokyo, it would be in the middle of a Japanese news report, and repeated again at the end of the news report, and it was on a couple of news broadcasts that day, and that is what he got. And that is when, straight away, I rang up the duty officer at Victoria Barracks to pass it on to him for action.
Ralph Briggs was also watching for the message at a station in Maryland.
So at that time I had checked with Weigel. He pointed out that probably of the 3 messages that he had discussed with me, the one we'd probably find was the one dealing with the breakdown in relation between Japan Great Britain. So it was that in mind that I was really glued to watch for on the date on December 4th, when I happened to catch JHP, or JAP is one of the other call letters they used, and I'd forgotten the frequency at that time, which it was intercepted on, but I did copy a message of about 200 words or so on a single message blank, and I spotted in the middle of it the one phrase that caught my eye. It wasn't the one I thought I was looking for, but it was the one that had to do with Higashi no Kazuyami. Relations between the United States and Japan were in jeopardy, or words to that effect. So I did get it off as soon as I could on our landline to Washington, and that was the last I heard of it until the morning after I'd come off watch, which was that same date, December 4th. At that time, Station Chief Weigel came up and confirmed what I had caught, and he was delighted.
Commander Lawrence Sappert had been waiting for the intercept. He took it himself to the office of Rear Admiral Lee Noyes. He heard Noyes phone the head of military intelligence to say the message was in. Colonel Otis Sadler drafted an immediate dispatch to General Short to warn him of the danger. But when Sadler saw the Admiral later in his office, Noyes refused to confirm the message, and Sadler's warning was never sent. As the information came into the secret office in San Francisco, Robert Ogg's northerly route for the Japanese fleet was alarming.
Beginning December 2nd, which I believe was Tuesday, and probably Tuesday afternoon, Hosmer came running in with some data here and said, let's look where this is, and something that I don't think I could have plotted fast enough as to where that might be, and then from there on, the next few days, it was very exciting. Each time he brought some new data to me and said, here's another reference and another reference, and they began to line across the Pacific, going from the west to the east, and beginning, and our first plots were just east of the international date line.
The White House was known to be one of the places where Hosmer's work was sent. The man who sent out the information was Captain Richard McCullough, chief of the 12th Naval District based in San Francisco.
I never questioned that the materials that I worked with, either that related to the tracking or the materials that had to do with, let's say, acquisition of our purchase of code books or any of these things, were going back to the proper authorities through McCullough. And as my later confirmations are, that he was a close friend, or at least certainly had direct lines regularly to Roosevelt. At the time, I presumed they were straight in comparing all our notes that we did in the middle of the war with Hosmer and the people that were in Op 20G. There was no question about the routing, that it was directly from McCullough to Roosevelt.
At a cabinet meeting on December 5th, Roosevelt appeared to make use of such information when he and Navy Secretary Frank Knox discussed the Japanese moves.
Well, you know, Mr. President, we know where the Japanese fleet is.
Yes, I think we ought to tell everybody how ticklish the situation is. We have information. You tell them, Frank.
Well, we have very secret information that the Japanese fleet is out. They're out of harbor, they're out at sea.
We haven't got anything like perfect information as to their apparent destination. The question is, in the minds of the Navy and in my mind, whether the fleet is going south. If they go south, the presumed objective is Singapore.
Every indication is that they are going south, Mr. President. That's the obvious direction.
But it's not absolutely certain that they couldn't be going north. You haven't got information that they are not.
Well, that's right, we haven't. Well, we must conclude that they are going south. It is so unlikely that they would go north. I don't think they're out just to maneuver. We in the Navy think they must be going to do something.
Saturday, I went in without Hosmer and plotted the information that I had, and I was excited enough about finding the fleet was 500 miles north of Hawaiian Islands, to drive to his home that Saturday afternoon and tell him